right, Mr. Cornell Duvalier. Thank you for the time you have served at this post, but you have earned a retirement. All right, y'all. The thing is, I get distracted when I'm doing these videos for YouTube, and I get off on a tangent and my videos end up going 10 hours long. And it's because I'm trying to fit so much into one video on the project I'm working on, and it just doesn't work. In the last video on the 1956 Philco, I deleted scenes of the capacitor test where I removed this replacement I'd installed years ago, and I tested it and thought I had a shiny new one to replace this, but instead when I looked I didn't. So I ended up going into my old used part stock and installing a twist mount Multicell FP type electrolytic. And I wanted to show in that video that the one I was installing was actually better than this newer one that I had taken out, because this one right here with its acid leakage and everything was so terrible. And so I tested both the one I installed and this one right here, both on my digital capacitance meter, and I also tested them both for capacitance and leakage on the load test of this old EICO 950B bridge tester. I did that trying to establish that the one I was putting in, that old part I was putting in, was not a violation of what I talked about reforming capacitors, and the reason I don't do that in that video. And it got into kind of a long drawn out thing because it took time to both use this tester and this tester on both capacitors, but I was really just trying to establish that I wasn't installing a piece of junk to replace a piece of junk. Another thing I got into in that test sequence was a comparison between this modern digital capacitance meter, comparing it to the results on capacitance tests that I was getting from this old bridge type tester here. I still use this bridge tester quite a bit, but I never use this thing or really rely on it for capacitance test on any electrolytic that is above 40 microfarad. This thing's accuracy really kind of falls down bad over 40 microfarads. Generally, I can test capacitors that are up to about 50 or 60 microfarads roughly, as long as I don't have to go to the expanded range here. Once I have to use this old 950B on the expanded range, it's pretty useless for capacitance test. Now, that said, the voltage test, the load test, and the power factor on it are still really good and useful on the standard range. But the standard range on this tester only extends from 0.1 microfarad up to 50 microfarads. So above 50 microfarad, I'm forced to use the expanded range, and this one right here just doesn't get it on the expanded range, y'all. Everything preferably above 40 microfarad, I use this digital tester for. I'll test anything above 40 microfarad for capacity using this digital tester, and then I'll test them for load capability and power factor using this. The reason I normally take the time just on my own when I'm working off video to use both this tester and this one is because I like to keep track of the comparison of the test results between these two instruments. I do that in preparation for a rainy day when this one right here may not work and I may have to, for a time, rely entirely on this one. Testing capacitors for capacity on both of these meters helps me keep track of how this one corresponds to this one. So if I ever end up without this one and having to solely rely on this one, I won't be totally in the dark about how much allowance to make for the results I get measuring capacity on this one. It's all part of knowing your service equipment, and that's something you've got to do, because I have had times in the past when I've had to limp along just using this one tester right here. One thing about these old testers like this, they're not very vulnerable to charged capacitors the way these right here are. I have, in times past, inadvertently connected a charged capacitor to digital meters like these, and that was it. The meter was gone. Just that quick. I was without a capacitor tester. And one time I got into that situation, and then I had to just kind of, go clueless trying to use this one for about a month until I got another one of these. I've had since the 1980s. This is actually the third one of these digital testers that I've owned. These are not substantial at all against a charged capacitor, and in doing regular daily work, it is very easy to forget to discharge a capacitor. Maybe a customer comes in, or you just get called away for something, or maybe you just go for a cup of coffee and you come back and you forget that you did not discharge that electrolytic the way you should have before you connect it to a meter like this, and there goes your meter just that fast. Here, for your viewing pleasure, are the deleted capacitor test scenes from the 1956 Philco that I deleted from the previous video on this. Hope you enjoy. It's riveting stuff. Just out of curiosity, we're going to do a test on the capacitor I just pulled, and the one that, with no small sense of irony, I'm planning to use to replace this temporarily. Emphasis on the temporarily. Come here, don't make me chase you. Okay, that's not looking too bad. Step it up a range. Trying to work this one-handed. 89.5. 89.5, okay. Now, here is what I'm planning to use temporarily to replace that. This is actually a new old stock part here that has a 80 microfarad and 30 microfarad and 20 microfarad all at 450 volts in it. This is a capacitor I've used many times as just temporary test on changing out suspect capacitors, so I'm going to use it again and we'll see how it tests, and it might actually test worse than the one I took out, but we'll see. Trying to work this one-handed, y'all, just doesn't get it. But here we go. 98.1, 98.1, okay. So we got a high power factor in an electrolytic capacitor on a tester like this will show up as an increase in capacity. So this one right here is already at the point I would never leave it in as a permanent installation. So let's test them now on the main event. I also like to do this just to keep track of how close this thing right here matches my digital meter. It's probably gonna differ from it some because actually on this tester I have to use the expanded range on any capacitor that's above 50 microfarads, so we'll see. Let's see what this thing shows a null at. Coming on up. Didn't really get a sharp null. Okay. On the expanded range. Getting tough for me to read here in the dark, y'all. I'm about to have to shed some light on the subject. Anyway, on the expanded range, 70, 80. Yeah, it's showing practically up there at about 140 microfarads actually on this one. You got to know your test equipment. I didn't really expect on the expanded range that it would do much better than that. So usually I only use this tester for everything up to about 40 microfarads, and then any electrolytic that I have to go to the expanded range for, I just end up relying mostly on the word of the digital meter, but I can still load test them with this. So okay, I want to put our voltage at about 400. And here we go. I'm gonna just go on, flip on down. 400 volts on electrolytic on the one I just pulled out. And we do have a null forming. taking a while to get there. Now, on this tester, it's current limited, but capacitors with when you get up into higher capacities, the higher the capacity is, the more time it takes to get a full null indication. But this one started right away, and then it's just pretty well stopped there. We don't have a sharp null line on this one. All right. Let's go for the next one. Okay, on the old Mallory. Nulling at about exactly the same point on capacity. At about 140 microfarads. Like I said, above 40 microfarads, this one right here is not really that usable. So now we want to go for 400 volts. 3, 2, 1. All right, getting there. And continuing on. And sharpening up. All right, that's what I was hoping for. Yeah, we're getting a good sharp null indication on this one. A while ago I was just talking about, we don't reform capacitors here. Well, when I said that, I was absolutely positive that I had a shiny new 80 microfarad 450 volt capacitor to go in this chassis. And then when I looked, I didn't have it. So, all in all, even though on the digital meter it's showing more power factor than the Cornell Dubelier, on the leakage test, actual load test, this one's testing all right. Just for the heck of it, we'll go for the other two sections that I don't intend to use. All right, just right quick to prove my point, we're going to test capacity first on the 30 microfarad section. And that takes us off of the expanded range down into the standard scale. So let's see what we have here. All right. And looking at the scale, okay, we've got 20 microfarads, and that is showing just right at 40 microfarads. So you see the accuracy of this instrument actually on the standard scale isn't half bad for its age. But let's go for the voltage test on this section. Yeah, she's getting some age on her. Just noticing last time I tested this was actually July of 2014, actually when I was working on this television originally, so yeah. But we got a sharp knoll there. Okay, let's go for the 20. Okay, now first, capacity on the 20 microfarad. By the way, I'm taking the time here. The reason I keep cutting out and coming back, I have to discharge this capacitor manually every time I do a load test, so. Okay, and then looking down here, it's showing about 24, 25 microfarads on the 20 microfarad section. All right. Last load test. Load testing every section, well, it's just time to do that again on this one, so I'm going to have to change my labeling on it because it's changed since 2014, so but we do have a good sharp knoll on all three sections. If there had been a bad section somewhere in this, I'd have hunted another capacitor. So all three sections, 80, 30, and 20 microfarad, are giving a full knoll indication on the load test, which this sucker right here with its acid leaking out around that terminal did not do. So I do feel like I'm about to at least install a capacitor that's in better condition. Okay, this is not the look I was going for, but it'll have to do. The new capacitor I thought I had, I don't have. I've already used it. So this one right here is going to have to carry it for a while. While I was hunting, I did find that I have a brand new 100 microfarad at 450 volts, which I thought about subbing in here in place of the 80 temporarily, but ultimately I decided on using this one, and I think it'll be all right. Off camera, I load tested both of these again, and then I just let them sit for an hour. I didn't discharge them. And after an hour, when I measured the voltage on this one, it had already bled itself down just all on its own to about 18 volts. So this one's got pretty high DC leakage, and as far as I'm concerned, it is bad. This one right here, on the other hand, was still holding just a touch over 200 volts. So while it's marginally high power factor, it's not leaking, and I am convinced that it's the DC leakage in the one I took out that was causing the problem. So I'm going to put the chassis back in with this arrangement, and we'll see how it works. For right now, I'm going to leave this one in because, like I said, I do believe this one right here, even though it's old, it's working. And if the television plays with it, they'll tell me that this one right here is still good to use as a temporary in other projects. So for right now, I'm going to leave this one in, and later on I will change it out with this one. So I'm going to go ahead and set this chassis back in the cabinet, and we'll give her another try. See, I told you it was riveting. My next video is still going to be pertaining to this, but it's not going to be directly about this television. I said that I was going to end up doing some videos about some other equipment and everything, and my next video is just going to be me harvesting parts that I intend to use in this project from another project in the past that didn't go so well. But I'll give you the backstory on that one when it comes along. Anyway, it's still going to be pertaining to the 1956 Philco. We are going to continue on with this television, and we're going to get it up and running, and we're going to continue on then and do an alignment on it, and we're going to see just how far back to pristine condition we can bring this old honey. Until then, get a hobby shop. We're out.